Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is all about recognizing the familiar, but also charting the course of what feels like a storytelling revolution. We're taking a really deep look into the source material around the evolution of boys' love or, BL storytelling. And if you're a longtime fan, you know this feeling. You start a new drama, maybe a webtoon, and 10 minutes in, you see it. You think, okay, there's the accidental kiss or, the forced roommate setup.
Yep.
And these tropes, they're comforting, right? They feel like a shared language. But I don't know, sometimes they can feel a little predictable, a bit limiting.
That is the perfect place to start, because this deep dive isn't about, rejecting that past, those manga, the Thai and Korean series that started it all. It's about understanding what's happening right now, this incredible wave of innovation, really. Yeah. Creators are taking that shared language, those classic setups, and they are deliberately rebuilding them.
They're turning cliche into something with real emotional depth.
Exactly, into character-driven stories.
So our goal for you, the listener, is to unpack that original grammar of BL the Foundation, and then look at how that language is being totally rewritten today. We want to see how modern creators are using things like psychological realism and emotional intelligence to make these stories hit in a completely new way. So let's unpack this. I think to really get what's so revolutionary now, we have to go back to that classic foundation.
Absolutely.
If you look at classic BL from the early manga all the way through the 2010s, there was this shared toolkit, a set of narrative tools.
Let's call it the trope toolbox. You already mentioned the accidental kiss. That was like the #1 catalyst.
It was almost always artificial, right?
Totally. It wasn't about consent or communication. It was just a physical shock that created instant confusion and, well, desire. And then, of course, the forced cohabitation. You saw that everywhere.
The dorm room, the one-bedroom apartment.
Right. And it was designed to guarantee conflict. You take two polar opposites, you stick them in a tiny space, and you wait for the explosion. The tension was just a shortcut to physical intimacy long before any emotional understanding.
And what about the gentler one, the childhood friends to lovers?
The slow burn.
The very slow burn. It was nostalgic, it was sweet, but it could be so frustratingly paced. The stakes were all about timing and fear.
The fear of just admitting something that had been obvious for 12 episodes, it was comfort food, for sure, but it didn't really have the, the urgency of most adult relationships.
And underpinning all of this was that one specific power dynamic.
The Seme and Yuk, the cold, dominant partner. The Seme who was usually rich, stoic.
Emotionally unavailable.
Right, and he was always paired with the shy, submissive, more expressive Yuk. That imbalance was the entire engine of the plot. One perceives, the other gives in.
But it's so important to understand why these existed. I mean, it wasn't just lazy writing.
No, not at all. It was a necessary code. A language. It let creators explore queer romance in societies where you couldn't just speak about it openly.
The tropes were a kind of shield.
A shield and a shortcut, exactly. But as audiences and society matured, that formula, well, it started to feel restrictive, which leads to a really important question. What happens when those familiar paths need to lead somewhere new?
And that's the perfect transition. Because modern creators are doing exactly that. They're not getting rid of the blueprints. They're just changing what they're building.
Take forced proximity. Like we said, it used to be about manufacturing external drama.
A lost key, a broken down car.
Right. Now, the point of being close is entirely internal. It's become a tool for self-discovery.
I immediately think of old-fashioned Cupcake. The two leads aren't just, stuck together. It's a mentorship.
Yes.
And sharing that time and space, it doesn't just make them fall in love. It forces the older character to confront his own life, his stagnation.
Exactly. The closeness makes it impossible for them to hide from themselves anymore. Or look at a show like Stay By My Side. The proximity is there because of a health issue, but the conflict isn't, when will they kiss?
It's about one character learning to be vulnerable when he literally can't create distance.
The tension becomes internal. It's the pressure of self-reckoning, which is so much more compelling.
But I do wonder, does that make it less satisfying for fans who love that high-stakes melodrama? Because if all the conflict is internal, you kind of lose that immediate dramatic payoff.
That's a fair point, but I'd argue the payoff now is just deeper. It feels more earned, and you can see that so clearly in how the power dynamics are being rebalanced.
The old Seme hierarchy is basically collapsing.
It really is. In shows like Semantic Error or, The Eighth Sense.
A stunning series.
It's just beautiful. And in those, the balance feels real. Both leads are incredibly complex. Power isn't just assigned anymore, it shifts.
It shifts based on who's being more vulnerable in that moment.
Or who has the moral high ground, or who is willing to demand emotional accountability. The traditionally passive character might be the one to take control by just forcing the conversation.
It's a partnership that's actually negotiated.
Which is how real relationships work.
And even that old blueprint of childhood friends is getting a dose of realism.
Our dating sim is such a great example. It keeps all the nostalgia of the trope, but it adds this layer of adult regret, of missed chances.
It acknowledges that you can't just pick up where you left off 10 years ago.
Exactly. Adult love in that show is about relearning the person you thought you knew. The slow burn isn't just a waiting game anymore. It's a necessary process of rebuilding trust. That's real psychological depth.
For me, the most striking evolution is just how writers are treating vulnerability and agency now. Within those old roles, they're redefining who holds the emotional power.
Let's talk about the Yuke archetype. Historically, he was fragile, needed protection, maybe even persuasion. Today, that character is so often the one with all the emotional power. He's the one starting the hard conversations, setting boundaries, defining consent.
It's a total reversal of control.
It gives the character so much agency. And on the flip side, the same archetype, the stoic, untouchable one, he's being humanized. We're finally allowed to see him hesitate or doubt himself.
Or even just break down. You see that so well in To My Star, where this famous actor is dealing with career anxiety and trauma.
Or in Moonlight Chicken, where the confident lead is struggling with money and his own deep flaws. These characters are allowed to fail now.
Which early BL would never let happen. The dominant ideal had to be maintained.
And that acceptance of flaws, that's a sign of a genre really maturing. Even something like the love triangle is changing.
It's less about jealousy-fueled drama.
And more about identity, self-worth. The triangle becomes a way for the main character to figure out what they actually want, not just who they want. The whole game has shifted from external conflict to internal exploration.
So, if the writing is demanding so much more depth, what does that mean for the stories themselves? It seems to be leading directly to the most important evolution of all, inclusivity.
Absolutely. The genre used to operate under this very narrow, very specific lens of beauty and perfection.
Everyone had to be flawless.
And modern creators are just shattering that. We're finally seeing an expansion of who gets to be the hero of a love story to reflect the actual, diversity of the community.
Can you give us some specific examples? Because this is where the sources get really interesting.
Well, we now see main characters dealing with realities that were just ignored before. Characters with disabilities, or the stories about navigating a relationship with anxiety, not about curing anything.
There are also hints of neurodivergence, right?
Subtle, yes, but it affects how the character communicates and processes things. And maybe most powerfully, you have these deep dives into cultural intersections.
You have to mention I Told Sunset About You.
Of course, a masterpiece. The conflict in that show is completely tied to the geography, the language, the specific pressures of growing up in Phuket. These aren't just gimmicks. They ground the love story in a real complicated life.
And we have to talk about gender roles. The rigid Seme and Yuke binary is slowly starting to make room for non-binary and trans characters.
It's a slow process, but it's happening. And it mirrors what's happening in the real world with queer visibility. It's positioning BL as a space for empathy, not just stereotype.
So to bring it all together,
the genre is it's maturing, fundamentally. It's proving it can use that same old scaffolding, the same tropes, but rebuild them with emotional intelligence and a real awareness of the world today.
So what does this mean for you, the person watching? The beauty of these new stories is that they still honor the past. They have the tenderness, the yearning, that bravery of a first love that always defined BL. But they also dare to ask for more. They ask harder questions.
What does love actually look like when people are flawed and dealing with real problems? What does equality mean when desire isn't just scripted by a trope?
The real power here isn't in destroying the old tropes.
No, it's about finding the raw humanity underneath them and building up from there. At its best, this new wave of BL shows us how storytelling itself can evolve to reflect who we are all becoming.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you. If the genre keeps moving this way, prioritizing vulnerability and character agency over, contrived conflict, what familiar trope do you think will be the next one to get completely rewritten? Will it be something like the amnesia plot? Or maybe the fake dating scheme? That's the thought we'll leave you with. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. See you in the next one.